Thunder, Pelicans from last night. AB. Abdul Nader, drives baseline, dunks all over Check Diallo.
Two-handed off the baseline. I thought he was going to rise up with one. Good job. And Chuck Diallo didn't know if he wanted to contest, take the charge, instead he gets boomed on.
More NBA Warriors in D.C. Steph Curry with some fancy moves before hitting the shot over Otto Porter.
Steph had an almost identical play in the first half on the other end of the court where he just dribble, and then little mid-range jump shot. He was spectacular last night.
Oh, yeah, great day for the Warriors. They stopped by and saw the former President Obama, spent some time with him.
Finally, college basketball, UCLA, Arizona State. That's Jalen Hands.
Oh, this is the nicest dunk of the year. Oh, that's nasty right there now.
The only thing that competes with that, Ja Morant's had one, the kid from Murray State, and that high school kid that we saw a few weeks ago with the in-game.
Man, this is UCLA. This is in Poly, dog.
Yeah, with the short shorts.
Now, I do miss that.
With the short
living
shorts,
in L.A., going to Poly, playing basketball over at the rec gym. Dang. I used to have a life.
Moving on to the Patriots, the storyline has been the rotating cast of wide receivers that have come in and out of New England. Since returning in Week 5, Julian Edelman has been a constant, though. The folks over at Pro Football Focus ranked Edelman the #1 receiver this postseason. 247 yards on 16 catches and a postseason best 14 catches for first downs. All right, CeCe, what makes Edelman such an effective weapon in the Patriots offense?
Well, I think the first thing you need to understand that in the Patriots offense, that is the attack position. That's what they're trying to do. Either throw the ball to that slot receiver, has nothing to do with Edelman, has everything to do with what they're trying to do. They figured out the passing percentages, where Tom Brady likes to throw the ball. They like to throw the ball straight down the middle of the field, and they like to throw it to slot receivers. Why? Because when you put guys in the slot, they have a three-way read that they can make at the top of the break. So it's more confusing for the defenders. It's the easiest position to play inside of an offense if you want to be able to get a guy open. It's harder to be able to double team him there, be able to take things away from him. He's the blitz hot. So in doing that, that guy's going to catch a lot of balls. Guess who used to catch a lot of balls from? Troy Brown. He played in the same position with New England. He was the first guy in this Brady era to be able to take over that position. Then they went out and got a guy named Wes Welker, and he did it at an all-time high. And then after that, you know what they did? They moved Gronk in there, Aaron Hernandez, and now, because he's not there anymore, then they went to Edelman to be able to develop him. So they're always going to have, in this offense, a guy in that position who has very, very reliable hands, very good short area quickness, where at the top of the break, they can't get bogged down and can get in and out of their break. So typically, that's a smaller guy. And you need to be a smart football player. Edelman, coming from his days as a quarterback at Kent State, understanding coverages, being on the same page with Brady. Him and Brady spend an extensive amount of time together. So I wouldn't necessarily agree that with Pro Football Focus, he was the best wide receiver in the playoffs. But that position in the Patriots is going to generate a lot of attention regardless what number, who the body is, and Edelman is that guy now.
And it has been a seamless year-to-year transition for the four names Chris mentioned. Troy Brown was there the first year of the Belichick-Brady era, was there through 06. Now, midway through that, he started playing some defensive back one season because they were shorthanded. But the year they won their first Super Bowl, Troy Brown was a nice player, but 100-plus catches, 1,200 yards, that's what they, that is way over what any realistic production for Troy Brown would have been in a typical offense. Then Wes Welker, who Miami Dolphins couldn't figure out a way to use. Wes Welker, if you take a snapshot of his 6 years with the Pats, you'd say, well, that's a Hall of Famer. If you just look at the stat sheet, you'd say, okay, so he averaged what? 1,200 yards receiving and 110 catches per season. While Wes Welker was finishing up, that's when they drafted Hernandez, and that's when it was a little different because you actually had an athlete playing that position when you hadn't in the past. And then Edelman. And so Edelman, it is, when Chris says 99% of guys are system players, this is the definition of a system role. That if Julian Edelman were on a different football team, he'd still be on the football team. But the idea that we'd be talking, oh, has he been a better receiver this postseason than Michael Thomas, than Brandon Cooks? That it would never happen. Now, where Edelman deserves credit is he has, I think, elite toughness, and he made a catch that might have swung a Super Bowl in that Atlanta game, an incredibly difficult catch while getting hit when the ball looked like should have hit the ground and it didn't. But guess what? If Brady does want to play till he's 45, and if in a year they move on from Edelman, we'll find another guy. There'll be another guy that puts up these similar numbers. And so I just think this is, they're able to scheme them open with what they do. And this is something you can explain far better than me. What they do as far as motioning him and the way that puts the defense in a tough spot and the way it makes the defense tip their hand as to what defense they're playing, that if you tip your hand to Brady, you're drawing dead, and I feel like that's one of the ways they use Edelman the best.
Yes, a high percentage of the time, they'll condense the formation as far as tight ends and fullbacks and other wide receivers. They'll line Edelman up at the numbers or 2 yards outside the numbers, because when he lines up out there, it gives Brady an indicator what the coverage is going to be. So on the defense, if I'm facing the defense, if they put the cornerback from this side over on that side, I know it's man-to-man. If they put the cornerback who's supposed to be on the left, I know it's some type of zone. So I put him out there just as an indicator. I can't leave him out there. Why? He doesn't have the height, doesn't have the speed, doesn't have the skill level to be able to get open at the numbers or outside the numbers. So I motion him inside. Gronk is the #1 wide receiver on New England. So I'll put him inside to get him hiding so I can release people off, and then he can come in behind him so he can use his short area quickness and be able to read the coverages. That's what New England tries to do time in, time out. When you watch the highlights, watch how many times in the field Brady's looking straight down the barrel of the defense, because that's where they want to be able to throw the ball, and that's where they try to manipulate to get these smaller receivers into that part of the defense.
And those 3rd and 10s against the Chiefs, the 3 3rd and 10s in overtime. You had Hogan made a big play prior to the overtime in that spot.
Yeah,
and
they just switched their responsibilities. Right. They ran the same play that Edelman got him for twice. Him and Hogan switched. Hogan beats him on the deep end.
I mean, it's the same thing. And it also plays to the strengths and weaknesses of Tom Brady. One of the reasons that they like to do it up the pump seams, as you would call it, is because Brady, for how great he is, he does not have the strongest arm in the league, certainly at this point in his career.
True.
So we think about passing only in yards vertically, but the field's 53.5 yards wide, 53 1/3 yards wide. When you are trying to go to the deep out, I mean, you can do the geometry equation, like you got to throw it a lot further. So what they will do is,
and not only you have to throw it further, you have to hold it longer. So part of their design is to get the ball out of Tom Brady's hand. He's got 90 dropbacks in the playoffs. Hadn't been sacked one time. Why? Because it's all part of the system that they run.
And this is where the Patriots and the college graduates and the smart players come into play. And this is why my partner was the most devastating slot receiver maybe in NFL history, because once you got moved to the slot, because you understood you had options.
Yes.
It wasn't just you are running 8 yards and going left. It's you're running 8 yards, and then you can choose reading the defense if you're going left, right, or I assume just turning around.
Yes.
And so you have to have a player that can know where the defense is soft spot is with how they're covering him. And then you add it to Brady, who can see the same thing. And that's where the synchronicity, I think is the word. That's when them being in sync. Let me say it like that. He knows he can trust Edelman is going to read the same thing he's reading. So he can throw it to him before he's even out of his break, and then you're basically drawing dead. That's why you don't have to have a 4.4 speed guy. You don't have to have a 6'3 guy. You just have to have a guy who can read that defense. It's why it's so tough to beat.
Good luck, Wade Phillips. Coming up, are the Cowboys getting rid of Jason Garrett for Sean Payton? We discuss next on First Things First.
The people from the Word Club said it's about trying to sync things up. It's like conjunction, junction, what's my function?
I had it. I was up in the air.
Things and making them sound right. Yeah.